Today on the Shrewd Deuce podcast, we are going to cover a whole bunch of cool little things. First of all, we're going to do a live react to a Choice 42 video. Either Stephen or it always looks like 42. I'm like, it is 42 video. Apparently, it's going to be like their newest release. So we're going to see what they came up with. They always come up with good stuff. In some international and big news, Putin is basically saying, you lose, and I'm better than you, in his own way. China also apparently was the patient zero was an actual doctor. Cool figure. And then we're gonna then run into like American news. President Trump is being railroaded by the political hit job, and DeSantis is under fire because he's using some deep fakes to try to fool people into all sorts of nonsense. And in Canadian news, we have our very own Jussie Smollett candidate. I mean, eat your heart out, Elliot Page, because we basically always want to like one up, America, because that's who we are. So all of that stuff and so much more today on the Shrewd Dudes podcast.
All right, so we are once again back for another Tuesday News Day, and as we had stated, this is a bit of a special time, just because this is the second time we're doing a live stream, live react.
That's right.
To a Choice for Two video, which we're going to do in just a couple minutes.
What was the first one, Stephen?
The first one that we did for Choice for Two?
Yeah, just remind people.
It's called The Procedure. We can provide the link in the description. It was a very entertaining video, but very emotionally jarring.
It was very dark.
Well, it was dark, but it was so emotionally. Like I had a coworker, and he was talking to me today, and I'm like, yeah, we're gonna watch this video about IVF today, and he's like, oh, okay, and I'm like, yeah, it's from an organization known as Choice for Two, and he's like, oh, you've talked to me about them before. He's like, have you ever reviewed any other of the videos? I'm like, yeah, I did this one. He's like, he watches it, and he's like, whoa, that was like crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, it was.
Yeah. It's a dark subject matter, so of course it's gonna be a little crazy.
It is gonna be a little crazy.
But it was one of our finest moments, because not only did Laura Clausen, who is she's the organizer or founder of
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So she basically liked our response so much that she featured it in
several different places.
And they featured it in a video about the procedure. In a promotional video, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yes.
Which is pretty cool. I was like, wow, like that's me. That's my face. Hey, my face is on there. It was pretty cool. So, yeah, we always like to support these kind of organizations because, particularly in Canada is incredibly backwards when it comes to like basically pro-life advocacy. The pro-choice, like death grip is basically like all over the country. Even like the UK and a lot of European countries are far more reasonable when it comes to abortion than Canada ever is. Like, most, if not the vast majority of European countries have an actual limit on how late you can abort a baby. Canada has no limits, zero limits. So, yeah, great job, Canada.
Fantastic.
We are full on Aztec child sacrifice. Well done. I mean, we're not doing the Kalima, reaching into their chest and pulling out their heart.
The way that we do it makes them kind of blush.
Yeah, they're like, whoa, dial it back, bro, dial it back. The Aztecs are like, we won't go there.
That was actually one of our best, like, This Week in Satire segments. Was like the Mayan priest who came to Planned Parenthood, and he's like, oh my.
What kind of crazy stuff are you doing here?
This is crazy.
Oh my gosh! Like, we at least have compassion on people. We cut off their heads and then pull out their hearts. You don't even do that. Kind of horrible monsters are you?
All right.
The Aztec gods are like shaking their fists, like,
oh
no, smite them now.
Yeah. Well, some people do need some serious smiting. But
They do.
now we're going to move into actually talking about and prepping for this live stream or for this live react. Well, we're in the middle of the live stream, so
we need to prep. Where's my papers?
I'm sorry, no, we already have all our sources. But so this one, from what I know, and all I know is that it's called Build a Baby, and that it is about IVF/surrogacy.
Basically, it's like taking the idea of Build a Bear.
Mm-hmm.
And applying it to like IVF.
Well, I think it's also like, I don't know, Laura might be able to correct us on this part. It might be related to a more recent popular prominent song, which is called Build a I don't know who it's by, but I know it features sometimes in like TikTok videos.
Okay. So I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with what you're talking about, but
there is a song called Build a B Word.
Build a B Word. Oh, okay.
So
good to know.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's Build a Bear, that one. Who knows? But before we jump into watching the film, Danny, let's just kind of break down how each of us right now, before we watch, how each of us feels about IVF.
IVF. Okay. Why don't you go first?
Sure. So IVF, my viewpoint has changed in the past couple years on IVF. Now, I know that people from the pro-choice, pro-abortion side always bring up IVF, and it's like, well, why don't you oppose abortion? Why don't you oppose IVF in the same way you oppose abortion? And I'm like, well, that's actually a valid point, considering that the way that we in modern society do IVF is that we have a couple, they're trying to make a child, they do through in vitro fertilization, which is, of course, the acronym for IVF, and they usually end up creating a plethora, an excess of embryos. And the excess from this embryos, usually they want 1 or 2 kids, and then they end up creating 10. And the excess are usually either frozen for what they call embryo adoption, or they're simply discarded. Now, being pro-life advocates ourselves, we advocate that life begins at conception, and so because these are embryos, that these are lives that they're throwing away, and as such, then even though the desire for IVF is not, it's different from abortion, because the desire for IVF,
trying to create life.
It's trying to create life, but in creating life, it shows a flippancy towards life. And that's my biggest like pitfall and downfall of IVF. If we could legislate, like, as much as we don't like using the government that much, if we could legislate saying that when we're using IVF, when we're like moving towards IVF, that we're trying to only create the number of embryos that we're going to use. Like, if we're trying to make 1 kid, we make 1 embryo. Then I would be much more supportive of IVF. But I'll break down how you feel, and then we'll watch this video before we have a massive panic of people.
When it comes to IVF, I feel like it suffers from the exact same problem that happened with birth control. Birth control was a good idea. And initially, the idea of birth control was to basically give married women like the ability to choose not only when to have children, so like married couples, but also how many children that they could have. The problem is that birth control eventually became pretty much the vehicle. It's like a Pandora's box. It became a vehicle for basically having sex anytime, as many times as you want, for as many, like unending sex without consequences. And the consequences of that have been like disastrous for society, for families, for abortion and everything else. I think the same problem with IVF is IVF began as basically an attempt to be able to help people who are infertile, like people who cannot have children, to try to find a way to help them to have children in a different manner. Like, basically, you try to artificially create an embryo, and then you try to put it into like a surrogate mother, so that basically a childless couple can have a baby. The problem now is that this has become the trendy way of having children. And then people will not only They'll get married without any intention of having their own kids, and they'll just go straight to IVF. A lot of lesbian and gay couples will use IVF as a way of circumventing the fact that they can't have children. Even to the point, like the other day, I watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and then like Rose's parents were all like, well, we want to have children. It's like, I can have children both ways. I'm like, no, you can't. You have to be given children. IVF. So basically, they've created a monster that initially was a good idea and probably a good had good intentions and all that. But as we are wanting to do, we take something that initially was meant for good and turn it for evil. Hence why there's like pictures of like footballs that the army has tried to weaponize into like bombs. So like, I mean, we always try to abuse something good and turn it and use it for evil. So IVF, I think, is becoming a bit of a monster. Like we've created a bit of a monster, and I think it's out of control.
Yep, it is 100%. So now that we've kind of given an opening take on this, let's watch Build a Baby. We'll see how that goes.
Probably not well.
So we'll full screen it. All right, let's watch.
Welcome to Build a Baby, where anyone who wants a baby can build one. Something broken? Missing an ingredient or two? In our state-of-the-art facility, using state-of-the-art technology, we can build your state-of-the-art baby. Starting with the swimmers. If you've got a sperm producer, you'll be quite comfortable in our semen collection room, where you'll find everything you need to perform the task at hand. No sperm producer? No problem. Build your baby with our extensive donor sperm bank, where all our donors meet the highest human standards.
Of course.
Now, on to the eggs. As with the sperm, if you're missing an egg carrier, you'll have full access to our egg donation bank, all gathered from top specimens. But if you do have an egg carrier, we'll pump that sucker full of hormones, so you can get as many eggs as possible in the shortest amount of time. And then the true magic begins. Building a baby in a petri dish. Truly a miracle. All embryos will be graded, and we'll discard any defective or genetically imperfect babies before you even know it. Building a baby shouldn't make you feel guilty. Congratulations! You're the proud parents of multiple embryos. Now all that's left is the womb. Are you a womb carrier? Get ready to party. No womb? No worries. Our womb rental managers will find the perfect match for your baby building. At long last, the day has come. Embryo transfer day. Cross your fingers that an embryo will stick, and you'll get that one perfect baby. Or 2, or 3, or 8.
You could be a
Not
rabbit.
to worry. Selective reduction will take care of that. Wondering what happens to your Build-A-Babies that we don't transfer? For a small fee, we'll store them in our top-of-the-line cryogenic freezers. Ready for you to try again, or discard, or donate, or give to science. A beautiful gift. But whatever happens, Build-A-Baby is happy to help you again, and again, and again, no matter the cost. Contact us and build your baby today.
It's like mad scientist like on Rogue, like on steroids.
Yeah, that's
pretty much what it is.
Definitely like that video. Okay, watching that video, like it starts off and you're like, oh, this is actually like trying to be fairly humorous.
Yes, they
and
are.
then it's like, oh yeah, we're just squishing kids. But in reality, it's actually what they're doing. It's just presenting it in a manner which is actually relatable. It's like, yep, no, we're gonna build your baby for you, because everything about IVF and everything about surrogacy is presented in this wondrous, very, very flashy, very attractive way. But then when you actually go under the surface of what IVF and what surrogacy is, you realize, oh, like, this is killing the majority of human beings created. And like, yes, when I look at like when they highlight it, it's like, oh, the baby that doesn't have an eye. It's like, yes, we'll get rid of that. Well, there is a factor that while like when we actually look at the factors and the percentages and the rates of miscarriages, the majority of miscarriages are for genetic defects. The problem is that we're creating this. The system is not perfect. And because the system is not perfect, there are going to be a far higher rate of genetic defects. And so we are going to be creating in effect, I don't want to say defective people, but that's in effect what we're doing.
We're going to create anomalies that we basically want to purge. Like, it's basically like, I just watched Guardians 3, and in that movie, like the bad guy, the big bad guy, the high evolutionary, that's what he does. He plays with genetics, and he treats life like it's like some kind of a flippant thing that he can, like, stamp out any moment. Like one of the most terrifying scenes in the movie is that he basically annihilates an entire planet worth of like creatures that he created because, like, well, it wasn't perfect, so I'm going to get rid of it. And I mean, we're basically getting into the place right now with IVF where we're playing God. Like we're basically, we're playing God. Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Carbonated Water put it actually fairly well, and that the video, it kind of subtly hints towards the idea of eugenics and kind of pursuing this perfect society. And when we're pursuing the perfect society, like, yes, right now the only place which we're pursuing the perfect society is in IVF, but then you think of films like Gattaca, and in Gattaca, you have those who were genetically modified. They're the only children who then they're the only people and the only citizens which have any value and any worth. And our society, like you look at Finland. Finland made this post, and it's like, oh my gosh. Oh, sorry, Iceland. Sorry.
Iceland.
My bad. I have slandered you, Finland. Please accept my apology.
Don't worry. They're hot on the trail.
They're pretty bad. So Finland, we're coming for you too. Shame. But they put out a post. It's like, yes, we've eliminated 90% of all Down syndrome. Well, you didn't eliminate it because you've helped these people adapt into normal society. You've helped them to fulfilled lives. No, you've killed them all.
You purged them.
You've purged them from existence.
But it's okay because they weren't really human. They were only potential humans, Stephen.
Well, and that's how IVF. That's how in this film and generally the IVF business treats embryos. It's like, oh no. Like it's like the abortion industry. They talk about the embryos as products of conception. They don't talk about them as human beings. They don't talk about them as living people. They simply strap a scientific or a semi-pseudo-scientific term onto it and then hope that people won't look closer into what's going on.
I mean, really, when you think about it, I mean, every society that's dehumanized human beings has always come up with euphemisms for what they are. Like, they never actually called like African American slaves people. They call them I don't know, like all sorts of derogatory names, but they never called them human. They definitely never referred to them
and
human.
Of
Jews,
course, if
Jews were never human. Nothing. So the fact that they basically have to convince themselves that these living creatures are actually human beings, that they're at the most initial state of development. Because look at how they talked about it. They talked about the eggs, and what they're doing is they're basically creating a whole bunch, as many as humanly possible. Why? Because it's the most efficient way, but it's also the way that you're basically creating like dozens of potential embryos, and then you're like, oh, this one works. What do we do with the other ones? Well, they're now commodities. It's like we have all these cheeseburgers. What do we do with the cheeseburgers? Oh, we'll feed one to the dog and we'll throw one out, and then
we'll give one to science.
We'll give one to science and all that. Like you're giving human beings. These are human beings that you're basically doing. If you are an actual consistent person, like if you're philosophically consistent as a pro-lifer, then you have to accept that when the second the sperm and the egg fuse, that is now a human being, and as a result, like ethics would demand that you have to treat that with the dignity that you would treat a human being, because it's just the earliest the earliest developmental level of human beings. That is a human being that will eventually become. Now, there's a difference between something that dies despite our efforts and something intentionally destroy or kill.
Yes.
Yeah? There's a difference between a dog that got out of the house and got run over by a car, and
one you put down with a shotgun,
and one that you basically run over with your own car,
or you torture.
Very big difference. Yeah, like there's a very big difference, and the problem is these people, because they treat these embryos as if they're just like pieces of living tissue, like bacteria or something like that. They don't treat them with any dignity, and this is the problem.
Well, and another element to this, like I think back, and I don't know if Laura was kind of trying to make this comparison, but when I watched this video, it was like, oh yes, like you can do this, and it doesn't matter at what cost. It's treating human beings as something you can purchase.
Yeah,
and it actually made me think back to the 2015, I know this is a scandalous thing to say, 2015 Planned Parenthood baby parts scandal. It happened. They were talking about selling human parts for scientific research, for whatever they desired, because they saw human beings only as a commodity and only as a dollar sign at how much they could profit from it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, yes, Planned Parenthood is like that, but the IVF industry is like that too.
Well, the IVF industry is like that, but they have kind of like more of a cover of we're the good ones. We're the ones that are trying to make but we're trying to make a better society, a utopian society where we've eliminated all of these negative things. And by the way, you're basically Sparta. Welcome back to Sparta. We are Sparta. This is Sparta.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're doing. They're basically saying, oh, this baby has Down syndrome. Don't worry. We can just take our finger.
We can remove that.
It. Oh, this baby has this genetic anomaly, a cough or whatever. We'll kill that. But the problem is that when, like, one of the things that makes that shows the true love and humanity of human beings is how we treat those who are truly vulnerable.
Yeah.
And like, anybody can see video on Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube of somebody doing some amazing thing to love or care for somebody with Down syndrome, or somebody with fetal alcohol syndrome, or somebody who's like who has, like, missing legs or whatever. Like, we look at that and we're like, oh, that's amazing. Look how they're taken care. Look how much love they're being given. Did you ever see the movie, Stephen? It's about that boy with a disfigured face. It was I don't remember the name of the movie. It was at Jennifer Aniston and Owen Wilson were the parents and all that. But it's I think it's on Netflix. Anyways, the movie was based on a boy who had a really obvious disfigurement on his face, and the movie basically, like, obviously he's very self-conscious and all that. The movie ends with everyone seeing that this boy, even though he had an obvious disfigurement in his face, that he's actually a really amazing person, and they all, like, completely fell in love with who he is and what an amazing kid he is. The deformity did not define who he was. And people, I've talked to people who've seen that movie, and they're like, that is so, like, it is so touching. We want to basically, like, take a kid like that and be like, well, you know what? We're going to kill him before he has a chance to actually, like, live, and before we have a chance to even see his personality and all the things that he would end up becoming. There's a real dark, almost like a real dark element of human experience, where we feel like we want to eliminate the negatives from life. We would love a society that does not value anything that is less than perfect. And by the way, anytime any society tries to build a perfect society, that you eliminate like suffering or pain, end up
doing the
or
same
anything.
thing.
It's utopian visions of a perfect society only ever play out in TV and movies. They never play out in real life. It is far darker. It is far worse.
Yeah, Carbonated Water says the movie was called The Mask.
I can look it up right now while we're talking.
Okay. Well, that's an old film, 1985.
That's really old. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
It was a recent movie. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this is like, I don't know if I learned anything new exactly about IVF.
The movie's called Wonder, in case anybody's wondering.
Oh, okay.
Wonder. It's a great movie. I recommend it if anybody has not seen it. Wonder, it's a great movie.
Okay, good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Danny is filled with movie suggestions, so
I really am. I've seen a lot of movies.
You've seen a lot of movies, that is true. Anyways, so last little tidbit about this film, and then we'll move on. Did you learn anything about IVF?
Anything new?
Anything new?
Let me think.
Because like the way that this film is presented, it's like those of us who have done even a little bit of research into IVF, this kind of just confirmed a lot of the things which we've been saying before. Mm-hmm. Whereas like the procedure, when you watch the procedure, there was nothing that you could, like, I remember my quote was cited a few times, and I'll quote it once more just because it was just a wondrous quote. There was nothing you could do but watch in abject horror. Whereas this one, you're kind of just like, oh, well, that's sort of humorous. Oh, that's dark.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I'm sure, and what the point of this one is because so many people in modern society have a positive view of IVF.
Yes.
And so this is going to, it's like, oh, like, this is how IVF works. Oh, really? That's how IVF? Yes, that's how IVF works. And that's exactly what they were going for. Yeah. And, like, well done. It does the job.
I think what the so with the procedure, what Choice for Two does is it tries to go one way. It says, I want to demonstrate how brutal this is by using a medium that normally that's probably the best medium to be able to demonstrate it in a way that you can see it without like the horrific reality of it. So like an animated short can do that better than like seeing an actual procedure like that in real life. If you actually saw the procedure like that in real life, it would be like beyond horrifying, right? But the animation kind of softens it. With this one, what they did was really brilliant. What they did is they approached it by trying to mock and trying to like poke holes in a humorous way and try to like basically expose the flaws of IVF by using humor and by using basically satire to pretty much poke holes in something that people thought was like, beyond reproach. It's a pretty brilliant move because what happens normally is we just talk about these things and everyone just has the assumption that, oh, IVF is so great. And we hear all the positive stories about people having children and all that. And what they do is they present it in a way, in a very disarming way, by using humor to disarm people, to make them think, I didn't realize that was happening. It's a pretty brilliant move because Babylon Bee does it all the time. They use sarcasm, they use humor as a way. And mockery is one of the most powerful tools that you can use to basically to break the illusion that something is like beyond reproach. And I think that's why this approach to use humor, mockery, and satire is a very effective one. I think this is going to work for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. So that's our reaction. Let's move on to some international news, because this is a Tuesday news day and we can't just endlessly talk about abortion and IVF. So
we can true.
We choose not to. Other people would probably want us to focus on other things too.
Sure.
So from Zero Hedge, Putin declares Ukraine counteroffensive failing, Mole's grain deal exit, and rare detailed remarks on the state of how the war is going in neighboring Ukraine. President Vladimir Putin said Tuesday that Ukraine's counteroffensive is failing, stating that Kiev has at this point lost a total of 25 to 30% of the military vehicles which have been supplied by the West, including tanks. Putin further affirmed that the counteroffensive began on June 4th has not been successful in any area and claimed that casualties on the Ukrainian side are 10 times greater than Russia's.
I will say something about this. First of all, is that I have heard this from like other sources. There have been other commentators that have been pointing out that Okay, so it's one thing to defend. When you're defending, you by far have the advantage because it's much easier. It's much more difficult to attack and to invade, and you lose a lot more of your forces when you attack. This has always been a military reality. And so when Ukraine decided that we're going to turn it around and do a counteroffensive against Russia, they knew that we're probably going to suffer a crap ton of like casualties. And sure enough, they are suffering like like a lot of casualties. So this is plausible. I'll say that much. Obviously, take it with a grain of salt. If this is Putin's official statements about it. Obviously, there's a little bit of the fog of war there, and a little bit of propaganda, but this is very plausible. I've heard many people say that yes, whenever you invade, yes, you're definitely going to be facing like a lot more casualties than when you're on the defensive.
Yep. So, well, and that was fairly obvious. Like, Ukraine has to be honest with themselves. They do not have the might to have a real offensive against Russia.
Yeah.
And like Ukraine has to come to terms, and I've said this for a long time, Ukraine has to accept that the only outcome that will not result in World War III, because if the United States keeps supplying troops like in a distant fashion, and now they're going to eventually start supplying troops indirectly, then this is not going to be a distant Cold War. This is going to be a hot war. And there are some people in the United States and some people in Canada really want that. I know that like my father-in-law wants that, and I'm like, why on earth do you want that? Why do you want a hot war over?
Why do you want to open up a Pandora's box?
Yeah, why do you want to open up a Pandora's box that could result in nuclear annihilation? It's just something that nobody should want. That's the ultimate worst possible outcome, is nuclear annihilation.
Well, and when you look at look at the conflicts that always happen, that constantly happen in the Middle East, and particularly Israel. Whenever Israel starts a war against like Hamas in the Gaza Strip, or they start a war against Hezbollah in the West Bank or something like that. There's obviously like a lot of actual battling and all that kind of stuff. One of the things that you always hear the West is always pushing super hard for some kind of resolution, some kind of peace talks, some kind of ceasefire. The one thing that I don't know if you've noticed, I never see even the suggestion that we should have any kind of ceasefire, that we should have any kind of like negotiations or some kind of like peace talks in this war. What you hear is a ton of rhetoric about how we have to send them endless amounts of support and money and supplies, and that the only acceptable like outcome is we have to win. I'm like, that is such a reductive approach to take. This is a very complicated, very complex matter, and you're not even trying to even consider an actual peace deal or peace settlement. And I mean, Vivek Ramaswamy had one of the best responses on it, and he basically said, we have to stop this idea that we cannot give any concessions or any peace talks where Ukraine gives up anything. I'm like, give me a break. There's a much bigger thing at stake, which is whether or not China and Russia make an alliance, because that's a real threat to everything worldwide. That's a much bigger threat than whether or not Ukraine loses some territory. I'm not saying that in the perfect world, Ukraine would not have lost territory, but we're not in a perfect world. We have to basically make decisions based on what is possible and what isn't. Russia is not going to agree ever to completely and totally surrendering any and all territories that they've taken. They can't. Otherwise, this entire offensive and all the suffering and all the losses that they suffered are going to be horrible. Like they cannot lead this conflict without any significant gains of any kind. And so you're going to have to abandon the idea that Russia's going to abandon all territories that they've taken over the last 20 years. Like that's not going to happen. Okay, so yeah, we have to do a peace deal, and I don't know. The West is just dragging this on. This is why I'm actually hoping that Trump would actually, huh?
Congo, stop dreaming for the annihilation of the meteor.
Apophis. What is Apophis, anyways?
Isn't that meteor that's supposed to hit in 2029 and destroy the world?
Mm-hmm.
Stop hoping for that.
The end of the world as we know it. I feel fine.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on from world-ending cataclysmic events and talk about COVID patient zero, what the mainstream media called a world-ending cataclysmic event. Was a Wuhan lab science conducting gain-of-function research? Oh, yeah. What do we say about that? Yeah, we told you so.
Told you.
Yeah, so the first 3 patients to come down with COVID-19 more than 3.5 years ago were lab researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, according to a new report from journalists Michael Schellenberger, Matt Taibbi, and Alex Gutentag. The report published Tuesday on Schellenberger's public Substack claims Wuhan-based researchers Ben Hu, Yu Ping, and Yan Zhu were patient zero for COVID-19. Citing anonymous U.S. government officials involved in investigating the origins of COVID-19, the Directorate of National Intelligence is expected to release formally classified material on the origins of COVID-19 later in June, potentially including the names of the 3 scientists, including to Public and Racket News, Taibbi's Substack project.
It's interesting because we talked about how like patient zero. The whole story was like patient zero was from a wet market, right? That was the whole talk. Not like, oh, a Chinese a market, that's where they basically get their stuff. And it's like, well, no, I mean, look at it this way. If you guys have ever seen Iron Man, the original first one, like the whole joke in the first one was that Iron Man destroyed a jet. And he's like, well, what are we supposed to say? It's like, well, I don't know. What did you say? A training accident, training exercise that went badly. It's not the usual crap that you come up with. It's like, well, that's just silly. It's like, in a training accident, like a jet plane went down. When I heard about the lab leak theory, even like way at the beginning, I was like, come on. That is such an obvious fake story. It was like the kind of thing you say when you want to cover the real story. The
lab leak or the wet market?
The wet market, idea.
Okay, yeah.
Like,
you were saying lab leak, and I was like, what?
Maybe I got my terms mixed up.
Okay, it's okay. You fixed it.
Thank you. I essentially say that even early on, they basically tried to make you think you were crazy when that was the most plausible theory ever. If anything, the whole idea you can't talk about the idea of the COVID Virology Institute being the source of the viral thing. The fact that they told you that was a crazy idea, it shows that they could not care less about the truth and about people critically thinking critically. These people are like authoritarians to the extreme. So I'm finding that right now we are getting a ton of confirmation of things that we've already known for a long time. The Durham report, the idea that the whole Russia hoax was a complete made up, nonsensical kind of thing. The fact that the Twitter files confirmed that the Twitter was basically beholden to the U.S. government, and they were basically working hand in hand to censor content. I mean, we're just getting so much confirmation about everything going forward. At this point, if you truly believe that the government is always got your back and always acts in good faith, you are literally walking around like a chicken, like an ostrich with your head in the seriously, it is so difficult now to not to say the government has had some extremely high profile blunders on their hands, and they have to do some serious rebuilding of public trust, because they don't deserve the public trust right now. Right, Stephen?
Yeah, they really, really don't. They've lost it over COVID. They've lost it over the convoy. They've lost it over this gender confusion crap. And we're going to talk even more about government obfuscation and lies from our elected officials. But that'll be later on in the show. So, continuing on for all these short stories before we jump into the big ones. Study finds high rate of depression in women who use birth control. Yeah. That's totally not predicted.
Surprise, surprise!
Study published in Cambridge University Press on Monday found an important link between depression and usage of oral contraceptives. in data analyzed by a subcohort of women who completed an online mental health quotient survey to determine the relationship between women who have symptoms of depression and the usage of oral birth control, it found that 130% of women who began using birth control as teenagers had a higher rate of depressive symptoms compared to women who never used birth control.
That's crazy.
So yeah, it's a 30% increase.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know this, but I talked to my sister, and apparently they're pushing this on every girl. Even if you're not sexually active,
yep,
they're trying to get girls to basically go on birth control as a default. As like a default. Like you should always be on birth control at all times, like never stop and all that. And this is just one of the countless health risks that come with like doing birth control over an incredibly long period of time.
Yep. And yeah, it's a major problem in how they're trying to push this and trying to push kind of all these pharmaceutical solutions. And then it's like, oh well, if your birth control fails, if you fail to use birth control, then oh well, we can just get rid of your problems. We can guide you towards abortion. And it basically just puts them in their pocket for the rest of their lives. It's just like, oh well, we'll take care of you this way. We'll take care of you that way.
Yeah, that's right.
It's trying to create a perpetual consumer. And the things that they're consuming are destroying them mentally, physically, and spiritually.
Yeah. I think so somebody in the chat said that they've been doing this for 20 years. They want to control your flow, your monthly flow. I've been here. Okay. There's a bunch of like stuff coming out lately in the last year and a half or something like that. That has been basically been showing that all the talking points we hear about drugs being like a something that is just part of life and the normal part of regulating your everything in your life is a lie, because I think this past year, I don't know if you remember this, Stephen, there was a big report, a big study, or a report, or whatever it was, that basically debunked the idea of clinical depression. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the whole concept, for anybody who hasn't heard about it, was for years, for decades, we've been told that, oh, there's such a thing as a chemical imbalance in the brain, and that the only way to basically address this clinical depression, which is like a chemical imbalance, is you have to use like these antidepressants to solve it. Well, these guys actually did some digging and looked into the source of these claims and actually checked to see if there was anything to them. And they basically took a gigantic bunch of dynamite and destroyed the whole premise. And that premise has been used as a excuse for doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, everyone in the medical health industry to basically prescribe these things like Tic Tacs. And they've been doing an enormous harm to so many people because they all believe the lie that, this is going to help me like with my clinical depression. It's a chemical imbalance. It's like, no, actually depression is like a headache. It's like, it's caused by a whole range of factors that you have to address. Like the medicine is basically like, let's turn off the noise that is causing you distress, rather than addressing the actual cause of the noise that's causing this distress. It's like, oh, you have a warning light on the dash of your car. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna like disconnect the light that make that light go on. It's like, okay, great, but you still haven't solved the problem that's causing that light to go on.
Yep,
that's the issue. So
I just a little note. We do have to move on pretty much right away here. I just find it really entertaining that Twitch censors the word lunatics.
Really?
Yes, it censors the word lunatic.
How do you know?
Because I can see it. I can see it on my computer because I'm the host. Okay. But on my phone, it's censored out.
Wow.
Oh, it's no censorship on your end? Huh. Okay.
No,
weird. All right.
Maybe I'll use the word loons or loonies. Looney Tunes.
Yep. Muffin sale.
That's right.
Since we're allowed to, beauty pageant.
That's the new word for elections.
Yeah. Well, but now we can criticize elections.
I know. Only on YouTube, though. We don't know about Twitch. Twitch might be crazy
No,
or weird.
Twitch has always been okay with it. Twitch has mainly been about the gender stuff.
That's right.
Anyways, let's move on. Amazon renders man's smart home system unusable after delivery driver alleges he heard racist remarks via the doorbell.
Yeah.
Jackson said the incident left him with a house full of unresponsive devices, a silenced Alexa, and a lot of questions. Maryland man who was sent into digital exile for a week with Amazon rendering his smart home system unusable following complaints made by a delivery driver, claimed he heard racist remarks directed him via the video doorbell. Brandon Jackson, an engineer at Microsoft, explains that in response to the allegations leveled against him by the delivery driver, Amazon had locked his account and logged him out of all the Echo devices in his Baltimore home. According to Jackson, the Thursday, May 25th, he tried communicating with his Echo devices, but his requests were met with silence. He originally attributed the malfunction to unauthorized access by a hacker, but soon realized it was improbable and proceeded to call Amazon customer service. He explained the Amazon employee informed him in a somewhat accusatory tone. The man who delivered the package to his house at 6 p.m. the previous day reported receiving racist remarks from his Eufy doorbell. Problem was, according to Jackson, nobody was home at the time. Befuddled, Jackson checked his cameras and found that rather than spewing racist remarks, the doorbell simply said, "Excuse me, can I help you?" The delivery man who Jackson was seen wearing headphones must have misinterpreted the message. He submitted the evidence to Amazon, but said it had little impact on their decision to disable his account. It wasn't until the following Wednesday that it was finally unlocked without any explanation from Amazon. Woo!
As always, fake racism hoaxes.
Yeah.
There was a story not that long ago about it was a black woman. I'm pretty sure it was a black university student. She basically said that somebody in the crowd had yelled the N-word, and then of course everyone jumped on her like, "Oh my god!" It was pretty much like tarred and feathered a person, and then it came out that whoopsie, no evidence of any kind anywhere could be found of that allegation, and nothing happened. You can basically you can basically accuse anybody of anything nowadays, especially if you're like one of those sacred cow communities, and you basically can get away with it. Like there's no downside, there's no consequence, nothing. You can basically accuse somebody of being a witch, and everyone's like, she's a witch, kill her. It's like the Simpsons episode, where Lisa's making a good rebuttal to her dad, and he's like, "She's a witch." She's like, "Ah!" And chase after her. That's basically what it's like today.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty crazy. So yeah. By the way,
this
kind of goes. Don't get these stupid systems. Don't get Ring doorbells. Don't get anything automated.
Do not transhumanize your home.
No, do not turn your house into a robot. Into Hal from what was that movie? 2000: The Space Odyssey.
Yep, HAL 9000.
Do not turn your house into HAL 9000. Yep. It's like, I can't help you, Dave. I'm going to kill you, Dave.
Mm-hmm. Well, because we all know, we've all watched WALL-E. We see what happens when they control our lives.
WALL-E.
And that was the almost utopian version of what happens when the technology controls our lives. But we've seen the negatives, not only for this guy, but then we see social credit scores. We see locking you out of not just your devices at home, but locking you out of your bank account, locking you out of your finances, kicking you out of your job because of comments that you make online. The possibilities are endless. Just stay the heck away. But
yeah, it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea.
It's just a bad idea.
Just like the whole premise of electric cars, particularly these new ones.
Mm-hmm.
If you Stephen, you've seen that episode of Black Mirror. I think I shared it once, and they basically can disable your car from a distance. They can remotely turn off your car and then make it return to the factory or something. It's like Minority Report. That's what they did to Tom Cruise, his character. The car basically said "You've been designated as an enemy of the state. I'm now driving you back to the police station."
Mm-hmm.
Please
still. Tim Pool talks about this frequently. He's like, yeah, well, if the electric car is connected to the internet and your entire life is controlled by one giant digital server, and it's like, oh, you have a warrant out for your arrest. I'm going to drive you to the police station now. It's like, what? No. It's not for me. Well, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So, because guess what? The system messes up. And, people oppose the government.
But Stephen,
because the government is corrupt.
The government never makes mistakes ever. They're benevolent and good. They're our overlords.
I'm gonna just bite my tongue on that one.
Yeah, I've like literally heard people say this.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I know.
One of my coworkers basically talks like this. Like the government will never.
The government will never trick you.
No, they never lie to us. They're good, benevolent leaders and overlords. Yeah, the government is your friend. Please.
Totally.
And if they're talking with robotic tone when they say that, you should really be skeptical.
Anyways, woke Marvel eliminates the Punisher due to problematic conservative fan base. Yes.
Well, that sounds safe.
Yeah, a year ago, progressive news outlets were calling the idea of the culture war a right-wing conspiracy theory that had no basis in reality. Yet the injection of far-left politics into entertainment media has already started years previous with noticeable propaganda efforts and movements, streaming television, children's shows and books, and even commercial advertising was replete with progressive ideological imagery by 2016 forward.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is fairly obvious: to erase competing ideals and viewpoints while saturating the market with only one political vision, the woke vision. It's called social engineering, and anyone who claims this does not happen in the U.S. is gaslighting. So, strangely, comic book industry has become a major battleground. Vast array of comic book characters are now race swapped, converted to LGBTQ, or had their histories rewritten to make them more acceptable for modern audiences. Same time, they promote everything from BLM to climate change propaganda, gender identity politics, and anti-gun messaging.
Mm-hmm.
But, however, one hero in particular is seen as so egregious and so triggering that leftists want to memory hole it together, the Punisher. So, Frank Castle, he was also played in a fairly decent Netflix series by... Oh, I forget his name. I can see his face.
Yeah, he's a very, very prominent actor.
Yeah, he was also in Walking Dead.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, so it's Punisher's story is a tragedy. Returning military veteran. His family was killed in what seemed to be a gangland hit. Federal agencies doing little to arrest it. He takes matters into his own hands. The concept of citizen crime stopping and vigilantism was becoming popular in the cultural zeitgeist of the 70s, and city governments, places like New York, were actively restricting gun rights for law-abiding people, which only made things easier for criminals. Exactly the same things are returning to the United States today. Mainstream leftists adamantly opposed to any form of civilian intervention, unless it's Antifa or BLM. Punisher was an icon of a high popular amongst conservatives, military veteran, and law enforcement officers in recent years. The trademark skull symbol can be found everywhere, with patches, gear, and flags supporting the image, often as representation of citizens taking matters into their own hands. The symbol was also used at the January 6th protests.
Of course it was. By the way, it's his name, John Bernthal.
Yes. So this month, Marvel officially declared the Punisher persona non grata, eliminating the character as readers to know him. Did he go to Blaze of Glory? No. In typical woke fashion, Frank Castle is captured by progressive heroes, chained up and forced to go through the struggle session, in which he is admonished as a murderer and a terrorist. He even brings the Punisher's Marvel even bring his wife back from the dead, only that she can divorce him and take his money and property, and then inform him that his lifelong crusade against the criminal underworld was all for nothing. Wow. We're done, Frank. I want a divorce, and since technically I'm still dead, I've already got it. With some help from Natasha, I've already taken the liberty of dividing your assets. I've sold your safe houses and all their contents. The real estate alone fetched quite the price. I have my half in cash and several duffel bags sitting in my new car.
Wow.
And he kills himself.
Lovely. She sounds lovely.
Oh my God. The story is left open to his return, just not as the gun-toting hero people know and love. Wow.
Yeah, it's like we talked about, the idea that the only like really dangerous extremists are on the left. Like they legitimately almost never exist on the right. Like you and I talked about this for the show. It was like when somebody called you a what's it called? A
Christo-fascist. Very common amongst the left these days.
Yeah, they it's like one of the terms that like I challenge you to present me one legitimate example of an actual Christo-fascist like extremist.
Well, every time they say
they don't exist.
Every time I'm just like, so define fascism. And then usually like they manipulate the definition to be like anything I disagree with, and I'm like, oh, that's
pretty
nice.
much, yeah. And way to fit that in there, yeah. But yeah, like for like if you actually look at it logically, a Christo-fascist extremist, it's the concept is you're a Christian and you want to control people through authoritarianism. Like, find me one Christian who actually wants to do that, who actually wants to like completely and totally rule the world and dominate all races like a white nationalist, the Nazi supporter or something like that. They don't exist. And if they do exist, there is not a single prominent example of one. And good luck finding one in the general populace. Like, they don't exist. However, finding like a left-wing fascist sympathizer, like the people who actually want to promote and practice the principles and the tactics of fascism and want to use it to dominate and shut down and shut up anybody who doesn't agree with them, you will find them everywhere. Any Antifa rally or like counter protest that you would look at, you'll find them there. They basically loved using the idea of using the government to shut you up and to lock you up if you have the nerve to share an opinion that they don't like. Like projection much? A little bit, I'd say. So anyways, it sucks about the Punisher. I never actually got into the Punisher. A little too dark a story for me, but I mean, the fact that they're erasing like established characters because they're problematic is horrible. Like I was so sad. I hate to say it, I was so sad that they gender swapped the Little Mermaid. I'm like, they're gingers. There's so few There's only one ginger. One, actually, no. Like, there's Merida from
ginger swapped.
Yeah, they ginger swapped her. Like, it's not cool, man. There's so few gingers out there. So little ginger representation. Hashtag, ginger erasure.
Ginger lives matter.
Ginger lives matter. Even though we don't have souls, our lives matter. Come on, people.
That's right. You go to Kia, still can't buy a soul.
Yes,
I don't think they sell souls anymore, so you're out of luck.
It's a sad thing.
All right, so from Zero Hedge again, homophobic statement of the decade. John Hopkins faces backlash after changing definition of lesbian.
Methinks you protest too much.
JHU has been blasted online this week after erasing women from its definition of the word lesbian for its LGBTQ glossary. The Teaching University's Gender and Sexuality Resources Office contains a glossary of LGBTQ terms and definitions and terms. It includes the definition for the term lesbian that makes a point to exclude the word woman. It reads a non-man attracted to non-men. Wow.
Talk about a completely nonsensical,
nonsensical meaning nothing.
Meaning of anything. It's like, that means nothing. So basically a dog attracted to another dog is a lesbian?
Yeah.
Apparently we have lesbian dogs. Go figure.
Yeah. Well, when you have something that's so broad that it could mean anything, then words have no meaning.
That is the most that definition literally means nothing.
Yep.
Anything like if you have a cat attracted to another cat, that's a lesbian.
That's a lesbian. If you have a man who loves his car, that's a lesbian. Well, actually, no, because that's a non-man.
Man, it's a non-man. So if you have a non-binary person who's attracted to their car, that's a lesbian. Like
technically, even a lesbian could be a woman attracted to a child. That's a lesbian.
It's lesbian. If a dog decides to hump your leg and you're you're a woman, well, that dog is a lesbian, and so are you. It's amazing how this works. It's the most nonsensical. Like the whole idea of the left, and particularly these left-wing ideologues, is that they want you to believe in absurdities. Like you need to stop apologizing for believing in what is rational. Rationality is not judgmental. It's not hateful. It's like we want you to believe, like this. I'm holding an apple, and they're holding, I don't know, like gigantic rock. Like that's not an apple. You hateful bigot! How dare you? I think it's an apple. How dare you tell me I'm wrong? It's like, well, it's not an apple. It's a rock. It's like I'll hit you with this apple until you bleed. But it won't be violence because you use words of violence against me. So
yeah,
funny how that works. Yeah. Like speaking of the worm, our carbonated water said that welcome to the worm linguistics. Yeah, you're right. Marxist propaganda is always based on the weaponization of words. That's how they basically change everything. So, for example, they way back in the day they changed the word homosexual to gay. They basically hijacked the word gay, which historically meant happy, and they used it because we want a happy sounding term in order to make our sexual desires sound like happy and and light and colorful and all that, and pleasing and all that. And this is why the whole term gender historically was only a linguistic term used to describe linguistic things, like things in language. I'm come from Mexico. In Spanish, you have masculine and feminine terms. Okay, gender was basically this describing the gender of the language. Okay, there's gender terms. What they did is you have a guy like John Money, who was a very corrupt and extremely psychopathic, guy out there. I was going to say loony, but yes. But he basically took the term gender and created a brand new category. He hijacked the term, turned it into this competing term that's supposed to be side by side with sex, and he used it as a way of trying to argue against objective reality and objective truth. That's basically what they did. So the idea, gender as a category for what you are, does not exist.
Yep.
It was completely invented by these mad scientists, these Marxist mad scientists, as a way of trying to complicate the issue for regular people. A regular person, the simple solution is, what is a man? Oh, somebody with an XY chromosome. Problem solved. Super simple. A little baby can understand that. A little child can understand that. But what they do is they try to complicate everything. I was like, what's super complicated? You're using high school biology. It's like, yes, because this is a basic foundational part of what reality is. If you have a dick, you are a man. It's pretty simple, but they're trying to gaslight you into thinking that not only are you being super simplistic and naive and you're a rube, but they're also trying to tell you that it's hateful to suggest something as simple as men and women have basic and very identifiable differences. It's the game they play. So absolutely, it's an evil tactic. It's meant to promote demoralization.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, we should move on because we have to address two fairly major stories in the last hour, and we're still not done the small ones. So let's briefly cover this. Let's briefly cover this very quickly. Watch the video.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
High school kids threatened with detention for booing LGBT video. Kids react with mocking laughter to clips showing two women kissing. And so we're just going to watch the video because it's fairly interesting.
Wow, this bug. Wow. Why are you showing this to kids?
Children are not into this.
Hey, I'll warn you guys now, if you're going to be inappropriate, I will have supervision down and give all of you a Saturday school for next year. So knock it off.
Okay.
If you don't agree with me, I'll punish you.
Yeah. It's called abuse.
Because
abuse of power.
Her exact phrasing was, if you're going to be inappropriate. Their inappropriate was, we're going to boo your propaganda video, you nasty narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, nope, if you even think of opposing me, then you're going to be sent to summer school.
Oh, it's a struggle session in school.
Yep. Mao has infiltrated our schools.
Yep.
And we will all suffer.
I mean, I remember reading testimonies and stories of children, particularly Christian, because a lot of these stories revolved around children who were Christian children who were basically part of atheist indoctrination schools in the Soviet Union. And it was pretty crazy. They were very, very heavily pushed and punished if they did not repeat and comply with all of the talking points that they're supposed to say. They're supposed to say God is God is an illusion and this and all that kind of stuff, and that the dictator Chairman Stalin was the all the best man in humanity and all that. They have to repeat all these talking points, and we're back there. We're back to schools that are basically state-sponsored brainwashing indoctrination centers, because that's what they do. Any kind of communist style system basically wants to they see education not as here's information so that you're better prepared for life. It's like, no. Here's information so that you will think like we expect you to think, and so we can brainwash you. That's what schools are like, though. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy, man.
Oh yeah.
Anyways,
Well, and we talked about the Edmonton video from
Yeah.
last week. The Edmonton
was
video
bad.
is very similar. The Edmonton video was if you choose not to show up for Pride events, then you're not a Canadian and you should just get out. Like, this is utter madness from the left. And yet the media on a lot of these stories is silent, and then for a long time they will ignore it, and then eventually in like 5 years to be like, oh yes, like it's a good thing that schools are calling out anybody that opposes the woke agenda.
Yep.
Yeah. Feels good. Yes. So just quickly going over the comments before we jump into talking about Trump. Hookups, yes. To actual normal Canadians, we appreciate that phraseology to describe us.
Oh, we are a rare breed, man. We know it.
Yeah. Conqueror, yes, you are far from normal. We're also not that normal, but you know, we're
we accept our craziness. When people call me weird, I'm like, thank you. Like,
oh, I know.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, my coworker was funny. I was talking, like, love Cade. He's a good coworker. He's still deciding what he wants to align with, and he's like, well, like, I like talking with you. You're very open-minded. And then he looks at me and I'm like, and he's like, that's not the proper form. You're not open-minded. You're open to discussion. And I'm like, that's it. And I'm like, very unlikely it's going to change my mind.
It's true. The problem is like a lot of people on the left, they believe, like they will say this legitimately and literally have no way of recognizing that they are closed-minded. They'll always say, I'm open-minded.
Yeah, I'm open-minded.
If you ask them directly, they will tell you to your face, I'm open-minded. And then you talk to them, and everything that they say and every way that they react to anything that you say and any evidence that you provide, they will always respond with a closed-minded response. Oh, that can't be true. Well, how do you know? Well, I just know it's not true. Well, based on what? It's like, well, I just know it's not true. That article is not from like a peer-reviewed article. I'm like, give me a break. I'm like, oh my gosh. Anyways, take us into Donald Trump, the Donald Trump circus.
Yes, indeed.
It is becoming it is becoming clown world down in the States right now.
It is. So let's jump into that and have an interesting time and an interesting discussion. But before we jump into that, just because Donald Trump is a very interesting topic these days. So let's have an interesting discussion. Like right now, of course, we do attract a lot of people from the conservative aspect, from the right. Sure. But we want to have conversations with those from the left. We want to know how you feel about the Trump indictment.
Yeah, of course. Like,
we have very certain views about it, and I'm sure most of the people that are watching right now on the live stream have very certain views on it. But we want to have discussions across the aisle. We're not the kind of people to be like, oh, people who oppose us would be like, we'll just give them the finger and tell them to go away. No, we want to have these discussions. We want to try and have open dialogue. But let's talk about Donald Trump. So Donald Trump's stony-faced during federal indictment hearing. Stony-faced in a blue suit and a red tie, Donald Trump sat flanked by defense lawyers in a courtroom to face criminal charges for the second time since leaving office. Former President
stone-faced? Shouldn't be stone-faced, not stony-faced?
I think this is British.
Yeah, no, Brits.
The Brits. Stony-faced.
Such a cheeky fellow.
Yes. The former president listed with a slight frown where prosecutors accused him of improperly possessing. I always devolve into Irish because that's just my default accent.
It's true. It's very good.
So just a few moments before U.S. Marshals had processed Mr. Trump like any other defendant, taking his fingerprints, date of birth, and address. No mugshot was taken. However, Mr. Trump is so famous, officials said that they did not need an additional photo. Former president, known for his bombastic oratorial style, did not address the court while taking his arraignment, even to enter a plea. We most certainly enter a plea of not guilty, one of his attorneys, Todd Blanche, declared on his behalf. The same table as Mr. Trump was Waltine Nauta, personal aide that federal prosecutors have charged as a co-conspirator. The two who had traveled to court together did not appear to interact once inside the courtroom. On the other side of the aisle, the second row sat Jack Smith, the Justice Department special counsel, who just days ago unveiled the bombshell charges that Mr. Trump had hoarded top secret documents at his Mar-a-Lago estates. He too said nothing, allowing lawyer David Harback to take the lead, arguing the government's case. So, this case, like, it's the case that they're offering is slightly different because, and I actually highlighted this, and I'm going to briefly go into this before we jump into the Daily Mail story.
Sure. Okay.
So the two things that make this a little different than what we covered. This is not what I was going to talk about. This is the wrong story. This is not what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's not the right one. Yeah.
No, it's not. It was another Newsweek story. So give me 2 seconds, and I will find that story in our Discord server. So Danny, you have some quick discussions, and I will grab that.
About Trump. Okay. So
yeah,
people who have looked at, okay, so there's two major things that have come out, like, going after Trump legally. The first one was obviously the indictment from New York. Okay. That indictment is completely out to lunch. Like, everyone knows it. Legal scholars know it. Even Democratic pundits and media know that thing is a sham of, like, in massive proportions. That one's a clear witch hunt, totally based on garbage kind of like stuff. Okay. But the actual like attempt to, like, indict Trump on the confidential documents, that seems to hold a little bit more water. Now, here's the thing: is it possible that Trump might be found guilty under one of their many trumped up charges? Sure, it's possible, and they might even have a decent case. Two of the things that I heard, because Ben Shapiro did a full rundown.
He did, yeah. I heard his breakdown yesterday, and his breakdown. Well, his breakdown is entirely, and that's why I highlighted this article in the Newsweek story. It's all down to one piece of evidence.
Okay.
It's all down to the audio recording.
Okay.
Now, some, of course, have doubted the audio recording because so far, right now, nobody has seen or heard from it. Like, the only news source which is, like, prominently pushing it is CNN.
We have a transcript, don't we? Transcript.
Well, again, transcript, like, it's possible that this could have been faked in some way. It's hard to say.
I'm not saying that it's like, scamming evidence. I'm saying that as far as we know, all we have is like a written account of what supposedly was said, but we don't actually. It's kind of like the whistleblower. We'll get to later, but again, we're hearing reports of what the whistleblower has, but we haven't actually heard the actual recordings of Joe Biden and Hunter. But go on.
Well, and like what I was saying, that if this is actually true, if the contents of these recordings are accurate, then yes, like, this is admission of a crime in several regards, and like the best argument that they have to defend Trump is, well, if Trump is being pursued, then Biden and Hillary did the exact same thing. They should be under the exact same charges, and this is just an unequal pursuit of justice. Now, of course, if the audio recordings are fake, if they're false, that basically the indictment is just a whole bunch of trumped up fake charges. So that's kind of my take. Like,
wait, the DOJ would have trumped up like fake charges?
Yeah,
what?
that's
what a groundbreaking, like, new thing that's never happened before for this organization. They have such a stellar record of being totally above reproach. Like, my goodness. I don't know. I think that the whole thing just reeks of every, like, the DOJ is basically completely and totally compromised, weaponized.
That's why there's a significant amount of doubt that these audio files are real, especially considering, like, we're going to be talking about the Burisma story in just a couple minutes. And according to all sources, the DOJ and the FBI has had these recordings since 2017.
Oh, but Stephen, don't you realize this is the same organization that said that they had a PP tape?
Yes.
Like, it was so obvious. They had a PP tape.
They had a PP tape. Of course it was
and
real.
They never published it, but it was there. It was like even Adam Schiff said, like, I've seen the evidence. It is so damning.
It's so
like,
damning. Yeah. Sure
was there ever any evidence? It's like, well, yeah. My goodness, these people, like, the problem that nowadays that I find, and I run this all the time, and I run into this all the time, is that people believe that all of these things happen in a vacuum. They never take into account all of the information about, like, the DOJ has a horrible reputation of like, one-sided enforcement. They have a terrible reputation of attacking people with totally fraudulent, totally trumped up charges, and a terrible reputation of being basically used as the weapon by the deep state, including like Joe Biden and Merrick Garland and all that. So I mean, like, people, like, dude, get your head out of your butt and start taking the context of who these organizations are, and take Trump, maybe give Trump a little bit more credit. They tried for 4 years and they could not find anything, and so they have to continually make up charges. These people are not. You cannot in any way believe that the DOJ is in any way the good guy here. They're like, oh well, we just want to get to the bottom of things. Oh, okay. How did the bottom of things go with Hillary Clinton? Right. Well, what? We're not going to investigate her. And Joe Biden and all of the stuff about him, bribery scandal. By the way, I found out that bribery, like if it's proven that the president was bribed, even if it was before office and it's affecting him now, that is an impeachable offense. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know that.
Legitimately a grounds to basically, like, not only impeach a president, but also to basically guarantee that he can never run again. Like, that is Joe Biden is the one who basically should be, like, prosecuted at the very least for impeachment, if not for high treason. Like, taking bribes from a foreign government to affect, like, American policy. Like, oh my gosh, the guy's the most corrupt former vice president ever. My goodness.
Yep. Oh, well, there's a reason that the Biden crime family is trending. But yeah. We're going to briefly go. So we'll talk about two other stories. So first off, we'll talk about what Trump did after the
I love this. What makes me love this guy.
Feliz Cumple?
Feliz cumpleaños, Don. But they didn't spell it right. It's Feliz cumple.
Cumple.
That's cumple is shorthand of cumpleaños. It's like, happy. It's a shorter way of saying cumpleaños, which is birthday.
Okay. So Trump heads to famous Cuban restaurant Versailles in Miami after pleading not guilty to 37 counts as he buys everyone their lunch and they sing him happy birthday. Trump complained about a government that's out of control and teased his Tuesday night speech in Bedminster, New Jersey. To find Donald Trump left federal court and went straight to the restaurants where he offered to buy food and everyone and listen to customers sing happy birthday. Former president who turns 77 tomorrow prayed with religious leaders, took a photo with mixed martial artist Jorge Masvidal, and ripped a government that's out of control. Food for everyone, he shouted in a famous eatery with a surprise stop after he pleaded not guilty. He flashed his frustration amid the singing, some birthday, we got a government that's out of control. I think it's a rigged deal here. I'm going to make a little speech tonight in Bedminster, and I hope you're all going to be there. What?
Look at the picture.
Yeah.
The first picture they show of Trump with this crowd. That picture tells you everything you need to know about Trump. Trump is universally beloved by supporters. Like, everyone loves him. He can go into a restaurant, like in his home state and all that, and this happens everywhere he goes. People flock to see him. Okay. Contrast that with Joe Biden. Joe Biden cannot go anywhere. He has to go in very, like, methodically, like, orchestrated places because he is universally, like, hated by people everywhere. Trudeau is my crown example. That man literally cannot go in anywhere in Canada without an armed escort and completely and totally, like, pre-screened things. Like, the guy literally cannot go in Canada without being shouted down. And he pretends like he's, like, beloved by the Canadian populace. He's the most hated prime minister ever. Trump does this everywhere, and people just love him, and for good reason. This guy not only has charisma coming out the Wuha, but he's also a legit, like, he knows how to connect with people. which is really amazing. And I can't tell you the amount of stories that I've heard of people having incredible, like testimonies of what Trump has done for them and how he's been, generous and kind-hearted and all that. This is the kind of thing you want in a leader. Like a person who can connect genuinely with people, not just someone who pretends to connect and who talks down to people and all that. Like Donald Trump is. He's really is like a good example of a man of the people, and this is the kind of stuff that makes me love. Like, can we swap Donald Trump for Justin Trudeau? Like, seriously, I'll take it any day. Thank goodness.
Yeah. Alrighty. So let's briefly address this last thing. Should do with Joe Biden and his deliberate corruption. Burisma audio tapes could cause cataclysmic events for President Biden. Matt Whitaker says. Senator Chuck Grassley claims Burisma exec had 17 recordings of calls with Biden as insurance. So, Chuck Grassley made a stunning claim Monday as a Burisma executive who allegedly paid $5 million in a Biden bribery scheme maintained audio recordings of the calls with the family as an insurance policy. Former acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker discussed the explosive developments days after the FBI turned over the document to Congress that allegedly detailed a criminal scheme involving then VP Biden. Quote, "This is explosive. There are so many issues surrounding this, but remember what my home state Senator Chuck Grassley said. This was redacted from the document they looked at. This is 1023 that Chris Wray finally provided to the House and the Senate. This information that there were recordings of the President of the United States talking to foreign national about bribes was redacted from that. That's extraordinary in and of itself. Now, the contents of true, I mean, obviously this is a cataclysmic event, because you don't just have the types of recordings usually available, and it will prove essentially that Joe Biden knew and that what his scheme was to abuse his power as vice president."
Yeah.
So, like, this is, again, just stacking on the evidence against Joe Biden. But, of course, mainstream media, like, Fox is one of the better ones, but they're still pretty darn bad. But they're the only ones that will widely publicize that this is happening.
Yeah.
And like at this point, Joe Biden should be facing two things. He should be facing a serious impeachment from the Republican House. And because of what they're doing to Trump now with the indictments and arraignments, they should be doing the same thing to Biden. They should be indicting and they should be arraigning him. It's kind of the only option here. Yep.
I like what Conqueror said, like, in Canada, Joe Biden would get the maid treatment. It's true. Very much so. Yeah. Joe Biden should be in jail. Hillary Clinton should be in jail. And Justin Trudeau should be in jail. And this is not just because, this is not the kind of rhetoric where like, oh, I just don't like him, so I wish he was in jail. No, it's not the way if somebody is genuinely innocent, then no, I don't want them to go to jail just because I don't like them. That's the right. That's people who are conservative. They want justice. The problem is that we know, you hear about this kind of stuff, and you're like, well, I know that Joe Biden will never face justice. It's kind of like that scene from V for Vendetta, one of my favorite dystopian, future kind of movies. The guy basically says, the main character, the protagonist, he basically says, there's no justice for men like this. Mm-hmm. Right, like in this case, it was Prothero, but he basically says something we all know. These people don't face justice. They don't actually face like actual like legitimate consequences for their actions. They are above reproach and they are untouchable. Joe Biden is one of those untouchables because he's protected by a system that sees him as useful, and so that means that they basically like he is immune harm, any kind of prosecution, any kind of like. Thing. That's why when Trump, did you hear about that, Stephen? Trump said that if he's reelected, he's gonna appoint a special prosecutor or a special somebody to basically investigate Joe Biden for legitimately, like for the crimes that he's committed. Which I'm like, yes, do it, because we want to see justice. I want Joe Biden to not only do I want Joe Biden to face like justice and actual like punishment for his crimes, but I also want it to have a chilling factor, because that's one of the reasons why you punish people. Because if you punish somebody, everyone else like looks at that and says like, oh crap, that could be me, and so it has like that chill factor that makes people stop considering doing that kind of stuff. And that's the problem. We basically, this stuff is out of control because nobody is ever facing any punishment for like legitimate crimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's crazy that you have a friend who signed up for May for late July. Crazy.
No, jeez.
That's truly horrifying.
It's basically the suicide booth from Futurama.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 25 cents, baby.
That's right.
All right. The final thing we're going to talk about on this subject is the AI videos, AI images from DeSantis.
Mm-hmm.
So DeSantis attack ad uses fake AI images of Trump embracing Fauci. Fake AI images depict Trump kissing Fauci on the cheek, allowing the DeSantis campaign to frame Trump as a close supporter of Fauci's policies combating COVID-19. So the campaign backing Ron DeSantis as a Republican presidential nominee in 2024 is used what experts identify as AI-generated deepfakes. June 5th, the DeSantis War Room Twitter account just shared a video emphasizing Trump's support for Anthony Fauci, a former White House chief medical advisor. Video includes real clips of Trump discussing Fauci and a collage of 6 pictures of the two men together. Of the 6 images, 3 appear to be AI generated, showing Trump embracing Fauci. In the collage below, they are top left, bottom middle, and right.
Can you actually find the actual video that they used? Because I only heard the audio but never saw it. It should be on Twitter, right?
Yep. Let's find it.
I think I may have found it. Yeah, here it is. Look for DeSantis War Room.
Well, yeah, I'm on their page.
Okay,
this would have been from probably
this is from
June 10th.
Looking at June 5th.
June 5th. Well, that was a while ago.
Mm-hmm. And it has like the community notes underneath it. No luck?
Oh, I'm still scrolling.
I know it's a lot of stuff on there, hey? If you want, I can send it to you. Let's see. Yeah, but so basically,
there it
is. Okay, you got it.
You're fired. You're all fired. All 4 are fired. You're fired. You're fired.
Today I walk in, I hear I'm going to fire him. I'm not firing him. I think he's a wonderful guy.
Should you have fired Fauci?
So a lot of people ask me that question, and I did it right. Because if you do fire him, you're going to have a firestorm on the left again.
Why did you feel unable to fire Fauci?
Personally, you're not allowed to.
Every time he goes on television, there's always a bomb. But there's a bigger bomb if you fire him.
Frankly, you can't win that one. If I would have done it, I would have taken heat.
Right there. If you go back, just go back to that one screen.
Yeah.
There's a one screenshot. Just kind of go right back to where that was.
These 3.
Right there. Okay. So what happened? What's the basically what's at stake here? Okay. So what happened is this is like an attack ad run by Ron DeSantis. Now, absolutely I agree. If Ron DeSantis is going to attack Trump and try to go after Trump, the best thing he can do is basically Fauci. His Trump's COVID response has a lot of conservatives and a lot of people who are even his supporters saying we don't like what you did there.
Yeah.
Okay. So absolutely, that's fair game. Even here in Alberta, the NDP ran attack ads against Daniel Smith. Okay. Nothing specifically even out of the norm. Nothing new under the sun there. However, the problem is that the DeSantis campaign intentionally and purposefully mixed a bunch of real images. So a lot of those images are real images of Trump and in press conferences with Fauci. And they mixed those images with what are completely fake images, AI-generated images of Trump and Fauci. And the fact that they mixed those in with completely secretly in the background shows you that this was intended to mislead people. Okay, because they're sharing fake images of Trump hugging and embracing Fauci. Now, for people, I don't know if you can pull it up those images. The Fauci images in question are really obvious. Okay, the Fauci images are like where like Trump is like like embracing like having a full on hug with I don't know if you can show it on the screen because you can't see it. You can't see it. I just want to show people like what these images like actually are. The images in question are images that basically try to like try to show that like look at this like Trump holding and kissing like Anthony Fauci. Now, if you really scrutinize, it just look like a fake image.
If you scrutinize,
just looking at it.
If you look at it from a distance, no, it doesn't.
No, but if you look close and if you actually like analyze the image, it looks like the proportions are wrong. The fact that he's kissing him on his face with glasses doesn't make any sense. But that requires you to look closely at the image. And if you look at the other image, the one where he's hugging Fauci, like that one actually looks like it might potentially be like a real image of him hugging. And of course there's 3 images like that. He's hugging him on the bottom right, he's hugging him on the top left, and in the middle. In the other images, the ones that are actually legitimate, you can actually see Trump. Sure, he's looking at him, he's sitting next to him, maybe he's smiling at something else, but none of those actually imply that he had a close personal, like almost like buddy relationship with Fauci. This is deception, and it's purposeful, intentional deception, such so that Tim Pool actually said, like, you know what, that's enough for me. I'm done. Like he wouldn't vote for DeSantis at all because they have not addressed this and they have not retracted this. This is like outright lying. What do you think, Stephen? I agree with him. I think that this is a step too far. Sure, attack ads, I'm not a fan, but attack ads are fair game. But when you're like intentionally lying and trying to manipulate people who don't know any better, that's when you've gone a step too far. This is like straight up lying, using fake images to try to manipulate people into thinking like, oh, they had a close relationship. How do you know? Well, I saw a picture of it. Okay, well, are you sure that picture's real? Yeah, it was an ad from Ron DeSantis. Most people are going to fall for that, like just regular people that don't know any better. What's your thoughts, Stephen?
Well, like I'm definitely against because they had like talk. I was listening to several other takes about this, and the War Room would have had to create those images. They would have had to request it from AI, because apparently if you create an AI image, then you like own that image. And so they would have had to either say that they got it from a specific source or like say that they basically did it themselves. So I'm definitely not for that. I think that this all of this, and I'll go back to the image briefly. Everything that could have been done in this ad could have been highlighted with this center one. Because this one, it's like that's a negative, it's a neutral. This one, like they're kind of interacting, but this one, it's like, oh, like I'm looking at you, and like this is not that's not a face of disdain. Like in all the interviews, it's like, oh, I wanted to fire him at the firestorm, and it's like, well, like that is not a look of someone you want to fire.
Mm-hmm.
Like if this was Trump doing that, like you saw the picture of the one nurse when Danielle Smith came, and the nurse was like, she had the finger secretly to Danielle Smith, and you could tell she was livid, she was angry. Like that's not the face of someone who's livid. That's of someone that's angry.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a time when Fauci was praising Trump and Trump liked him, and then Fauci turned on him and Trump turned on him.
Yeah.
And like that would have been a much better angle. So it's ultimately a loss for DeSantis.
It's definitely a black eye for his campaign.
A black eye for his campaign. And it's a real shame that he hasn't come out and openly condemned and like said, okay, like I want to distance myself from this. I don't want to be involved in this. This is something which we should not have done. And I'm moving away from it. Yes,
it's not even that hard. You can just acknowledge, like, that was a mistake. We shouldn't have done it, and we won't do it again.
Yeah,
that's not even that hard. You wouldn't even lose face with your supporters, and you would actually gain a lot of respect from like people on the other side, like that support Trump. They'd be like, okay, well, that's we accept that people make mistakes as long as you acknowledge it. Hey, no problem.
And so it's odd and it's wrong that they haven't distanced and they haven't acknowledged that mistake. So yeah. I'm with that there. And yeah, like things are going to be interesting. Like, based on everything that we're seeing, my prediction so far is that because of these indictments are going to make it so that Trump fairly easily wins the primary.
Yeah.
And then because these indictments are, by all relevant polls, they are decreasing his statistics amongst general election voters.
Mm-hmm.
I think at this point, he's going to be nominated to the Republican candidacy, and I think he's going to lose.
I disagree. I think there's a lot of factors that we have to take into account. For one, the 2020 election was very different. It was a election for a lot of reasons.
It was
primarily COVID. Biden's not going to have the COVID advantage. Second, Biden didn't have the Notley effect. Okay, here in Alberta, in a previous election, Rachel Notley had the Notley effect. It was super easy for her opponents to point to her record, and that's all you had to do. And that approach was insanely effective for the local, like the UCP government to get reelected. All they had to do would be like, look at her record, and people were like, "Ugh, I don't like that record." And they cringed. So you're going to have the problem with Biden having his losing record and not being able to lie about it. That's going to be against him. And then finally, you have the problem that people are clearly coming out of the fear, the whole Bud Light effect shows that conservatives are finally starting to get pissed off enough that they're starting to turn on the entire LGBT push and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's a lot of factors you have to consider. And then on top of that, you also have to remember that a lot of Republicans across the country have learned the lessons about ballot harvesting and all these tactics. And so you're going to see a lot of differences in the next election. I'm not saying that proves everything, but it just shows that there are a lot of factors that demonstrate that this is not going to be the same election as it was before. Even people who were kind of like lukewarm on Trump are legitimately seeing yeah, I'm not a big fan of Trump, but man, what the DOJ and all these people are doing is just bonkers. It's indefensible. And a lot of people might actually be voting for Trump because they want this stuff to end. So you have to take a lot of factors into account. This is a very complicated matter as far as the next election. I don't think I don't think by any means that it's a done deal that Trump is going to guaranteed to lose. The other part, don't forget about the black vote. The black vote is consistently in a lot of polls showing that they're abandoning Biden in giant heaps, and he needs that black vote, that black base, to be able to win re-election. And there are some very troubling statistics that are showing that Biden is losing the black vote in massive numbers. So take that all into account.
Yep.
So it's not a sure thing.
It's not a sure thing. I just think that's my prediction right now.
Sure. Okay. My prediction is that I think Trump definitely has all the wind in his favor right now.
Yes.
Whether or not it's enough, that's another thing. But I think he definitely has the advantage right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So
next one.
Let's jump to some Canadian stories.
Canadian stories.
So this is one that I was somewhat specifically involved in. So, from Yahoo News, I'll take a punch for queer and trans youth any day. Ottawa MPP under scrutiny in wake of alleged assault at trans rally. So
by the way, for anybody who's not from Canada, an MPP is a municipal
member of provincial parliament.
Thank you, member of provincial parliament. He's basically like a state, not a senator, a state representative. That's basically what he is.
Yep.
In case you're wondering. Okay.
Yes. So MPP said he was allegedly rabbit punched while attending rally to keep trans and queer individuals safe. Oh yes. So So Ottawa Centre MPP Joel Harden is facing public scrutiny after he claimed that he was punched in the face by an anti-gender ideology activist at a rally on Friday. After reports of the alleged assault circulated on social media, video footage captured of the rally appears to show the megaphone striking Harden's face, the same place where he claimed he was allegedly punched. So I'm going to show you. Yeah, I'm going to show you a tweet from Joel Harden.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show you the tweet that he made. So this was right
It'd be good.
here. There it is. And why can't I see the tweet that was related to this? There it is. So, and punching people in the face. So this was in response to somebody saying, this is absolute madness. The far-right mob is not even a school anymore. They're standing in the middle of a residential street, yelling at people to leave our kids alone. Yes, that's the fault of the Ottawa police. The Ottawa police guided them in that direction.
Of course, yeah.
So that's not their fault. He's just attributing it to the mob, or attributing it to the protesters. And then Joel Harden says, I'm punching people in the face, but I'll take a punch for queer and trans youth any day. And he's clearly highlighting this portion of his face, which has a tiny little mark on it. So,
oh, by the way, people on the conservative side have suffered 10 million times worse harm from Antifa, from LGBT, like extremists and all that kind of stuff. Not even close.
Funny part that, of course, involves us is that one of the most prominent tweets related to that is mine.
Dragon time.
Yeah, it has 2,700 likes, which is like half of what he has. Yeah, it's half of what he has, and he has like 7 million views. So, yeah, people are not falling for it, which is good. But here is the post that initially just straight up debunked it. So there's an individual, Karima, and she pieced together a bunch of videos and not geotagged it, but she timestamped it. So June 9th, which is the date of the protest, at approximately 12:07 p.m. So this is the video, and there'll be they'll slow down and they'll zoom in on something, and just notice.
I'll see. Can't wait to see.
So, yeah, slow down his face, little thing on the face, and
Jussie Harden.
Yep, Jussie Harden bumps him in the face. Exactly where he has that little injury. Yeah.
What?
What?
What a coincidence. I'm sure one thing and the other are totally unrelated.
Yeah, totally unrelated. And then, of course, after this came out, then Joel Harden decided, I need to come out on this.
Yeah.
So, update. Last Friday, I broke up several altercations or near altercations that got started by anti-trans protesters. In one of these occasions, a woman was grabbing another woman by the hair. I put my body between them and I separated them. After separating them, I looked over my shoulder and was punched. I was holding a megaphone against my face. The blow glanced off the megaphone and my face was cut. The woman left and the altercation ended. And then he reiterated that in a video or a segment that he did with a radio host of a show called Toronto Today. I believe it's at the 7-minute mark.
This is on a black
transgender kids, but in earlier rallies, they think we have too many newcomers in our country, the usual white supremacist stuff. So it was a scary moment for our city.
Okay. Your initial claim was that you were punched in the face by an activist on Friday, and that was what was in the media on Sunday. You've clarified that, like, if I tell you I was punched in the face, I just feel like, or if I say on the radio, hey, I was punched in the face yesterday, I feel like people will assume that a fist made contact with my actual face. There's a megaphone here involved. Can you sort of clarify, like, maybe that a punch did not connect with your actual face, correct?
It did. As I said and clarified in that statement, Greg, I've been a union organizer for many years, and I'm familiar with trying to break up altercations with people when emotions get overheated. I put my body between these two women, the one person from the anti-transgender rally, grabbing the other woman by the hair and pulling her down.
Keep that in note.
This is
really? It resetted it? Ugh. Anyways, but that was the important part. He said two things right there. He said that I put myself in between two women who were having an altercation, and the one pulling the hair was of the anti-trans group. Guess what? Thanks, Billboard Chris. You proved this to be false. I'm going to look at Billboard Chris. He has a whole bunch of videos, but there's one which is fairly important. And it's a little ways down. It's from yesterday, I believe. And it's when you see the crazy lady. That's when you know you have to stop.
Crazy lady.
Yeah, look for the crazy lady. She's coming up pretty quick. You'll notice her because her face is just completely up there. It's just nuts.
The crazy
there it
lady.
is. So, here's, in the woman below, the woman named Dina Sharif. Tags her on Twitter.
She looks normal.
Yeah, totally normal looking person. So, this is the video. And this is what I initially tagged for you. Oh, I actually had the video. Dang, I'm an idiot. I didn't need to look it up. I'm an idiot. I'm like, wait,
Okay,
I totally linked this.
So point out where are we looking? Where are we looking?
Okay, so this little blue cape, as you can see in the video, the blue cape is this person, Dina Sharif. Because in the picture that we just showed, where she's going crazy, she has the blue cape on. So watch what she does. It's going to be right here, and it's going to drag out and So you notice two things about this video?
Where's Joel Harden? I thought he was right in the middle of that.
He's not. He's nowhere to be seen.
What? Where is he?
Yeah,
he's the hero that we all needed.
Yeah, apparently, but he's not there. And the person who's pulling the hair is the person in the blue cape, which is clearly Dina Sharif.
Trans activist.
The trans activist. So,
right.
Yep. When you start to lie, you just can't stop.
Well, there's two things I want to mention. By the way, Vivify
has done a great job of exposing this.
Of really exposing this.
I have
two things.
Applauded him several times during this entire encounter.
Two things I want to point out to people. Okay, number one is the fact that the anybody who's on the left, by the way, they that includes Antifa, that includes anybody from the Alphabet Mafia, that includes anyone from the BLM, anything like that. They all follow their tactics from the same handbook. Okay, this is called mid-level violence. Okay, remember that term. This is by I didn't come up with this. This is James Lindsay. Mid-level violence is basically a tactic where they basically come in force to a place like this, and they don't actually engage in like outright violence, or even if they do, they engage in just a very minor amount of violence, because the goal is for them to get a reaction. They want to essentially get regular peaceful people to react either by saying something like, something that they can weaponize, or by getting you to fight back with violence. And then they weaponize that against you, and then they claim that they're victims. This is the tactic that all leftists use, and they do this everywhere they go. The Joel is basically like, following the playbook. He's basically trying to cry that we're the victims, we're the ones that are being oppressed. It's like, imagine that you are peace. So imagine Stephen and I are sitting on the sidewalk or standing on the sidewalk, and we have a sign, and we're basically saying baby, the unborn lives matter. Okay, not bothering anyone, just having our own sign. Suddenly, one of these trans activists or like these people from the left, they show up and they start yelling in our face. And they start they want to grab they start pulling on our sign and all that kind of stuff. The second we push them back, they'll cry and be like, "Oh my God, back by anti-abortion, like fascists and all that." And then they'll get the police involved, and then they'll accuse us of being like the worst, people ever. This is how they operate. Okay, so that's the first thing I want people to know, that every one of these people, like, they go in, they use the same tactic, mid-level violence. They're trying to get a reaction or some kind of like a reaction from people. Secondly, and by the way, Joel Harden, like Joel Smollett, uses this because they all do this. They don't care about the truth. The truth, that they don't have the same values as you and I do. Stephen and I, and I'm sure a lot of people in the chat, we all follow probably the same ethics, which is it's better to tell the truth. Honesty is a good value. It's something that you should strive for, and you should strive to be believed because you have a reputation of telling the truth and being honest in everything that you do. This is not a value that the left has. They don't operate from that value system. In the left, the value that they follow is the only truth is power. It's the same tactic that is used by the and I remember like studying this. There's a technique in the Muslim world that basically says it's perfectly permissible to lie to your enemy in order to basically get a better a bigger advantage over them.
Yeah.
So you can make a peace deal saying like, oh yeah, we'll be at peace. And then the next day, once they put their arms down and kind of like they take a break, then you shoot them in the head. That's the tactic. The left does not care about honesty. Joel Harden could care less about the truth. If lying through his slitted teeth and his forked tongue means that he'll get like the weaponized sympathy and the goals that he wants, it's worth it. He will lie through his teeth in order to use this for his own benefit. And if he is ever, like he's being shown, if he's ever found out and proven without any doubt that he lied, all he will do is just be like, oh, well, yeah, I was wrong, but but then he'll just downplay it. He'll be like, well, yeah, maybe I wasn't punched, but yeah, we're still victims and we were still attacked, and because they don't care about the truth.
Mm-hmm.
These are pathological liars, and you have to take that into account always. This is why you cannot trust what they say on his face. These are not honest people. These are people who will lie to your face if they think it benefits them.
Yeah. All right, but speaking of people that will lie to your face if it benefits them, let's talk about Justin Trudeau.
The ultimate Jussie Smollett.
The ultimate person who will lie to your face. Justin Trudeau dismisses parental rights as far right. So he targets New Brunswick Premier over policy of informing parents about their child changing genders.
Mm-hmm.
There was actually a video. I'll see if I can find it while you're talking. There was a video of a teacher that it's very not safe for work, just a little bit of a warning. But she was basically just saying about how it was so terrible and how she will never teach in New Brunswick because she'd have to out children to their parents.
Yeah, I've actually talked to my coworker. We were talking about the idea that the ethics of hiding from parents, something that is pretty significant in the life of their child. And I was saying like one of the problems with this approach is you're assuming parents are guilty before having any evidence to prove otherwise. And he was like, no, it's just a good policy to protect kids. I'm like, you're assuming that kids need to be protected. That is the problem. You're already starting from the starting point of assuming that parents, unless proven, otherwise, that they themselves cannot be trusted. Secondly, you're creating an environment that is incredibly rife for abuse. Because if you any abuser will tell you that the goal of any groomer, any pedophile, anybody who wants to get at kids, the goal is to separate them from their parents and to keep the communication secret. The only difference here is that the teachers are considered to be above reproach. Like, oh, they're teachers. They clearly are will always child's best interest at heart. No, and what, the parents don't? The parents are just automatically not? That's garbage. I mean, here in Alberta, we had an incident, and I remember reading about this, and it's totally verified. We had an incident where a child, definitely underage child, I think it was 12, maybe 10, very young child. He was taken off the school grounds at a school here in Alberta by one, and not even by the teacher, by a volunteer, somebody who's not even hired by the school. A volunteer took this child individually off school grounds to a fetish festival, basically an LGBT, but basically this had all sorts of sex paraphernalia and fetish material, all that kind of stuff, so that the kid could go there, and they kept it from their parents. And this was and the second this came out, they're like, well, what's wrong with that? It's like, what are you talking
What do you
about?
mean?
You cannot take a child off school property like for a field trip, even the most legitimate field trip in the entire universe, without permission slips.
Yeah.
And you're trying to justify like these people are like they're a cult.
Oh yeah, it's a cult. Like even this. Yeah. So, like I've been, I've gotten a ton of notifications in the past hour, and I've been responding occasionally because there was a story that I didn't talk about, and it's this story from Kelowna. And there was a story from Kelowna of it was a track and field competition, and there was one girl who was doing better than all the other girls, and there was somebody in the stands be like, how can we be sure this is not a boy? And then this person was like, I want to see the birth certificate. And like they were fairly vitriolic, and I'm like, okay, I'm not a huge fan of the vitriol in which they presented, and like the child was traumatized.
Suspect from just off the outset.
Yeah,
it may be true, but like on an initial hearing, I'm like, that sounds a little bit like almost like too much. Like almost like I'd be surprised if that was actually true. Okay, go on.
Yeah. So, and I was like, okay. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the vitriol in which this apparent altercation happened, but the real problem is that it could have happened. This child could have been a boy, and that's the real problem. The real problem is that in Canada, we are very supportive of having boys play in little girl sports or men play in women's sports, because in Canada, denying someone their gender expression as a human rights tribunal abuse. And people are like, well, what's the big deal with having trans kids in sports? And I'm like, so you don't have a problem with having a boy in the girls' change room? They're like, well, that's cheating. Not. And I'm like, and also, like, let's compare boys and girls sports. Like the 15-year-old Dallas Football Club beat the United States women national team.
Oh, and I'll repeat this because it's worth repeating. I think we covered. I told you this stat last week. I think, like the world record holder for the female world record holder for 100 meter sprint in like the world, their time was like 10 seconds, 10.49 seconds. That was their time. 7,000 men have beaten that time, in like the history of records. That is how completely dominant men are over women. It's not even close. So when you're telling me that there's no differences, give me a freaking break. You have to be willfully ignorant or intentionally malevolent to try to argue that. You cannot actually make a legitimate argument saying that males do not have any advantage over women. But the problem is that you're not allowed to speak out against it, and if you do have the nerve to actually do so, the social consequences are massive. We had that situation here in Calgary where a male walked into a women's change room with little girls, 10 to 12 years old, several of them, and he was basically in the women's change room completely nude, showing his penis completely free for everyone to see. And what happened? Like the parents were too scared to speak out because they knew that they would be
demonized and attacked. And of course, the only media source that actually commented on this publicly was Western Standard. They did so twice. And the Calgary police, and we showed proof of this, the Calgary police never openly said that this didn't happen.
Yeah.
What they said they used very specific language to say that it did not happen as described, because as described in the Western Standard was that a man went into the change room, but according to the police, this person was a woman.
Yeah,
and so it wasn't indecent exposure.
Indecent exposure, because
in
their view,
very deceptive.
Super, like they're just freaking liars.
It's
massive, really
sad.
Liars. How can you trust your police services to operate in good faith when they're lying to the public and lying to their face? And even then, they came out later when they got a lot of pushback for that story from a lot of people, and they basically said like, well, the parents, they haven't come up and gave a statement officially. So it's really their fault. Like they should come up and give us a statement, knowing full well that what the police are trying to do is they're trying to to basically out them, so that they can basically
incite the mob against them.
Incite the mob against them. Like it's so slimy what the police did.
Super slimy.
So the problem here is that Justin Trudeau is just like Joe Biden. They're both working from the same playbook, the Marxist playbook that everyone is trying to follow from the World Economic Forum, which is that we need to install a communist-style system. And a communist-style system says children do not belong to the parents. Children belong to the state. They belong to, like, they are the ward of the state. That state is the big daddy, and parents are nothing more than babysitters.
Yeah.
And if they defy the will of the true parent, which is the state, they basically can be removed by them.
Yep.
So when you tell me that Justin Trudeau's not a communist, give me a break.
Okay.
Like, these are communist things. Anyways,
these are communist things. So, yeah, I'm going to briefly go back to that story just for a couple lines, and then we're going to talk about Canadian socialized healthcare for a couple minutes because we're already past 2 hours. So, It's unfortunate that once again Trudeau has often denounced partisanship while urging conciliation, using inflammatory rhetoric which will alienate a large portion of Canadians. His divisive language comes in the wake of the government of New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs making controversial changes to the gender rules in the province's schools. One major change is that the parental consent will be required for trans or non-binary students under the age of 16 to change their names or pronouns at school. Higgs, who is facing a revolt from some of his own members about the policy, is defended as taking a strong positive position for families. Yes. And he's at least being open and transparent about making parental rights a political issue. He's even willing to fight an election over it. I believe it strongly in the case of finding a solution here where we do not exclude parents in their child's life. So in most of Canada, it's now official policy to keep parents in the dark. If children come out as trans to teachers, these guidelines have been brought in by stealth and without discussion with parents. So, and then in steps the Prime Minister saying, quote, far-right political actors are trying to outdo themselves with the types of cruelty and isolation they can inflict on these already vulnerable people. He said last Thursday as he targeted Higgs' new policy. So that's what Justin Trudeau said. We already briefly discussed it, and we'll address this final story from the Westphalian Times. Canadian socialized healthcare wait times reach the highest in recorded history. Socialized healthcare system is progressively collapsing, a new report shows. We've been calling this out for years. Fraser Institute conducted a survey of specialist physicians across 12 specialties in 10 provinces to evaluate wait times across specialist diagnostic and surgical procedures in the country. In 2022, the wait times reached their highest point. The survey reported a median waiting time of 27.4 weeks between referral from a general practitioner and receipt of treatment, longer than the wait of 25.6 weeks reported in 2021. The wait time is the longest wait time recorded in the service history and 195% longer than in 1993 when it was just 9.3 weeks. Oh, yeah. Great deal of variation in the total waiting time faced by patients across the provinces. Ontario reports the shortest total time, while Prince Edward Island reports the longest of 64. That's over a year. There's also a great deal of variation among specialties. Patients wait the longest time between a GP referral and a neurosurgical procedures, which is 58.9 weeks on average. With those waiting for radiation treatments, begin treatments in 3.9 weeks. Canada is one of the few countries in the world where all hospitals are managed by the government. Private healthcare is limited to a small array of procedures and practices. Yeah. So this is basically inevitable.
The rule of thumb in Canada: don't get sick.
Yeah. Do not get sick. My goodness.
It's horrible. The problem here, Canada has a massive problem that they can't fix, and the problem is that it is exacerbated by the political system. Okay, any election, you suddenly have we have a problem. We're heading towards a cliff. The Canadian healthcare system, the socialized healthcare, is unsustainable. It will not be able. It will eventually collapse under its own weight. It cannot be sustained. It's basically imagine like a tank of a gigantic barrel, a rain barrel. And the water continues to fill, and there's no exit. There's no way for that water to come out. Eventually, that water will reach the top, and it's just going to overflow, and it'll be over. Canada is basically like that. We are not the healthcare system is basically heading to a cliff. It's more of a question of when will he hit that cliff. Okay. The problem is nobody is willing and nobody wants to discuss that problem, that looming disaster that we're heading to. And we basically, any talk of anything other than praising the socialized healthcare system, like, even suggesting that there might be some solutions that involve some private healthcare options, immediately you're accused of like, oh, you wanted this. It's like the Alberta election, that was a major attack ad. Danielle Smith wants to make you pay for this, and she's trying to destroy the healthcare system, and of course they have to backtrack and say it's not true. They did the same thing in the federal election. They accused in the last election. They tried to accuse what was the leader's name? And the conservative leader in the last election, the federal election.
Pierre Poilievre?
No, before that, the bald guy. Aaron O'Toole, yeah, okay. Aaron O'Toole, he was accused of trying to destroy and trying to do Americanized healthcare when he discussed a potential viable solution to the healthcare crisis that we have in the country. And immediately they attacked him, said he wants to destroy healthcare, and then he backtracked. So we basically cannot talk about the giant elephant in the room, which is our healthcare system is going to collapse.
Mm-hmm.
In 10 years, we're what is it, 80% of our provincial spending, or maybe it's Ontario's, will be devoted to healthcare. You cannot do that. You cannot run a province. You cannot run a country with a system that is basically it's exponentially becoming worse and worse and more expensive and less able to serve the people. So basically, the healthcare system in Canada is insanely garbage, which is why Justin Trudeau is pushing so hard for MAID, which is state-sponsored executions.
Yes,
because they're cheaper. It's much cheaper to kill people.
Well, and that's why they push this idea, and we covered this a few weeks ago. There is a reason that 30% of the Canadian population supports euthanizing, not those who are terribly sick, not those who are in dire straits. No. The poor and the homeless. Because this is what our system creates. Our system makes it so that we discourage poor people from utilizing the system and those who have little to quote-unquote offer society. It all circles back, like Jen Psaki, right back to the beginnings, what we were talking about with Build a Baby.
Yes, right.
If we have a society where we see human beings as commodities and not human beings that are intrinsically valuable and have worth, then anything is a valid option as long as it promotes the kind of fiscal good or the colloquial good of everybody working towards this utopian society, which is, of course, impossible because humanity is selfish and evil.
Well, and the big problem is that okay, there's some. I don't know if you've noticed. Maybe the people can confirm if they've heard this or not. One of the features that I found really interesting about the new Marxist ideology, which is permeating everything from ESG to these woke. Everyone woke follows this ideology. There is an incredible amount of arrogance that they completely and totally dismiss any wisdom from the past. Anyone from the past, they're dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
They're dumb. Nothing that anybody has ever said or done in the past has any value. The only ones that are brilliant enough, smart enough, and wise enough to decide what is and what shouldn't be done are us. We are the pinnacle of human evolution. We're the pinnacle of human thought. Only we can. And so basically, all of the lessons that you learn from history, all of the warnings that we've been through, these people, because they're so insane, they completely ignore any lessons from the past. The lessons that from communism failures, those don't count. We're brilliant. We're the best. We don't have to worry about that. It's like the idea that eugenics was done before, but we're impeccable. We could never ever do something like that again because we're so perfect and all that. Well, guess what? We're heading right back into eugenics, right back into it. We're no better than the Aztecs who sacrificed their own people to appease the gods, or no better than the slave owners of the antebellum South, who basically dehumanized an entire section of society, and we're no better than the people in Salem who were killing witches because they're like, oh, they're witches, they're casting spells on us and all that. We're no better, but we have like the people in the people in the woke cult have this like chronological arrogance, and you know what it's called? It's called progressive ethics. Okay. A good example of progressive ethics is like people who say, well, like, why should we do this? Well, it's like, like Justin Trudeau said way back when he was first elected, why did you appoint a mostly female cabinet? It's 2015.
It's 2015.
That is the logic. It's chronological snobbery.
Yep.
Believing that whatever changes that your side and your movement does are best and are good because you're doing them. And so you can't make mistakes. Everything that you do will always be right. And this is why they always use the language of like, they're trying to take us backwards. They're trying to go back, because they, in their view, it's evolutionary like ethics. And they're working towards, and in their view, evolution always leads to something better. Not realizing that they're basically like treating everyone like lemmings, and hey, there's a cliff, let's go. That's basically what it is. So, yeah, I don't know if people agree.
Yeah. So, this has been really, really great. I've enjoyed the live commentary. I've enjoyed all the conversations that we've had. It's been great. But this is where we have to leave you. We've been going for 2 hours and 10 minutes, and it's already past 10 o'clock here, and we both have to work in the morning. So that's where we're going to end the show for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. For those who participate in the chat, we love you all. Of course,
you guys are great.
Keep in mind, 9 days from now, which is next Thursday, is our open mic session. We will be posting the Discord link for our guest server. People can come, people can join, invite your friends, and invite people that disagree with you. We want to have an open conversation across all parts of the aisles to have an open discussion about the topics, because we're not the left. We don't censor viewpoints we don't like. We want to have a conversation.
That's right.
So if you want to check out our videos, you can check us out at BitChute and Rumble. The safer videos will, of course, be available on YouTube. You can also check out our website at shrewddudes.com. And you can also check us out on our text platforms such as Gitter, Twitter, and Facebook. Twitter is where I'm most active because All Hail Elon is doing a great job of keeping it very, very free.
He does good work. With
work. That said,
by the way,
yes.
By the way, I just want to say a real shout out to Elizabeth and to Console Document. You guys are awesome. I love.
And Conquer Worm, we love you.
Conquer Worm as always. Conquer Worm, Yod, and Yod. You guys are always amazing. But it's great to see people that that just have so many great takes and comes to make. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. So we will see everybody on Thursday at 8 p.m. Mountain Time for another live stream. So with that being said, Danny, sign us out.
We are the Shrewd Dudes.
Wait,
so
it's Tuesday. I sign us out. I sign us out. I'm confused. Sorry, it's late o'clock. It's late.
That's right.
Yeah, here at the Shrewd Dudes, we like to remind you why be rude when you can be shrewd. Have a great night, everybody. And of course, as always, God bless.